ready to go. Hello, good evening, everybody. Welcome to, this is our 12th and last webinar for the Food for Thought project. So I don't know where the time has gone, but we're delighted this evening for our last webinar to have Dearbhla Reynolds, who is a fantastic cook and foodie and the queen of ferments, as far as I'm concerned. And she runs brilliant workshops and she consults with Michelin star chefs and shows them how the art of fermenting, because I think it is an art. And this evening she is going to share some of that with us. So I see I have a few people still joining. So Dearbhla, just before you start what you're doing there, if you want to briefly tell us how you got into fermenting, or what was it that sparked your interest?
Oh my God, this could take up the whole 40 minutes. Just to keep it brief, I first started fermenting, oh gosh, possibly about 9 years ago. And it was a little notion that basically it was an article I read about making ketchup probiotic, which seemed ridiculous because I knew I didn't eat ketchup and I knew little about probiotics at the time. Really, I knew a bit, but not kind of, it just seemed like an odd combination. And I think with fermentation, you know, you need a door to open somehow or somewhere to let you in. And once you're in, then you can just go and explore this wonderful world. So I read the article and I never made the ketchup, but it really inspired me to start thinking about this idea of making foods probiotic. And like many things, I just started with the simple, like sauerkraut. Pretty quickly I had everything on the go then. Everything was being fermented. I had kombuchas, it was kind of a bit out of control, and it's not really that that's my nature to do things like that, but something was so intrinsically right about this. Something felt so right the minute I ate the food. Like it actually did something to my mouth, to my taste buds, to my my sense of digestion. And you know, I haven't really talked about this much before, but I was really kind of, probably looking back, not so well. I would say I had really difficult digestive challenges, and you know, in my lack of wisdom, probably just thought that was normal. That, you know, I wasn't old, but you know, I had a child and I was you know, aging, I suppose. And I just thought, well, that's normal. Things kind of start to fall into disrepair. So and I actually totally think that's rubbish now. I don't believe that. I think that we can age really well and be well, and for our bodies to function for us brilliantly. So that's the short version of how I got into it. It just felt so right. Probably looked so wrong to everybody that knew me. And I definitely did note a decrease in invitations to people's houses. I didn't get invited for dinner so much. Really? My husband was not so pleased. He would open the fridge and just not really understand what had happened in the fridge, because there would be jars with no labels and nothing was familiar. So, you know, I can appreciate that it doesn't seem like a natural thing for us to do, because it's become, you know, so unfamiliar to us to interact with our food this way. That at that time, I did seem to be kind of going off piste a little bit, but it just felt so right. And the feedback from my body and my health was just so positive that I just kept going. I kept going to the point where people would say to me, please tell us what you're doing. Please show us how to do it. And that's why I set up the Culture Club in 2012. Seems like a long time ago now, saying it that way. Yes, I set up the Culture Club in 2012 to just basically help educate people and to bring them into this crazy club and to try and ferment what they could. So it's been a lot of fun since then, teaching and educating people, and you know, seeing the interest turn on for people to kind of go, there's a bit of a what raised eyebrow, and then a real acceptance. And it's been really lovely to see fermentation nearly become quite a normal thing, quite a accepted thing, and you know, people to be excited about sharing their sauerkraut or their kimchi or their kombuchas, you know, words that really weren't in our vocabulary 10, 15 years ago. So it's really, certainly here, possibly in, you know, other Western countries they were. And then obviously when you look at native cultures, they've always been there. They've never left. They've never left the diet. They've never left the table as a food, because you know, really their importance is understood and valued.
Sure, and I think you know, fermentation is kind of seen as trendy now, with, you know,
yeah,
and even, you know, that whole lockdown sourdough thing, everybody was making sourdough and sharing their pictures and everything, but and really that's the fundamentals of it too, isn't it? It's just using the natural stuff around you to make something delicious. So do you want to kick off there, Dearbhla, just with...
Sure. So I know we don't have very long together, but when I first started to teach, my courses were 4 hours long, and in hindsight I kind of realized that I just so wanted to share everything with everybody. I need to just change something on my screen, that I really taught people too much in too short a space of time. So what I've kind of distilled down is what I see as 2 fundamental techniques that I really think, if you want to get fermenting, get on top of these as fundamental techniques, and then it'll just free you up to really play in the kitchen. So just with respect to what the series that you've been running and what you were doing, I thought I would look at the humble carrot, which, you know, I hope many people have been growing from their packs. So I was going to look at the carrot and show one technique with the carrot, and then I'm going to show another technique with the tomato, which I hope some people grew too. And actually, just to say, these 2 weeks ago were green tomatoes picked from the polytunnel at Helens Bay, and through my own lack of getting to do anything with them, they've actually ripened. So it's a bit of a winter bonus. So those are the 2 things that I want to really get to, so you can kind of stick with me on that one. To save the boredom of watching me grate carrots, I've already prepared all of those, but just the idea with this is we're going to want to get our carrots kind of down to, I hope you can see okay, but you're grading them down, so you're exposing the surface area, because the more surface area that you present, there's more for the bacteria to feed off. So I've graded them down, and actually I did invest in one of these. It's a lovely mandolin, and it ends up giving me just a really crunchy like stick to work with. If you don't have that on hand, grading it is just as brilliant, but you're just going to get a slightly different textured ferment, that's all. So for the sake of this, I'm going to I'll keep my measurements really simple so that everybody kind of gets the information in. I'm going to make a liter of a fermented carrot, and because I have it on hand, I'm going to use some dill, which, you know, is an amazing herb, but you may still have in your garden. I don't know, there's still a bit of parsley out my back pushing its way through. But essentially, when you're doing this, you can, I mean, this could be anything. If you've got a passion for spice blends, you can put your spice blends in. If you already know a kind of kimchi paste mix, that can go in. You can turn this into a different selection of herbs, Indian spice, like I do a lovely Moroccan version of a carrot. So the technique I'm going to show you can extend out to many, many things. And actually what's in the bowl could also be carrot and beetroot. It could be horseradish, it could be cabbage, just to allow you some freedom of knowing how to work with it. Very basic kitchen equipment. I have a scale here as well. You don't, well, I'm going to stick with the scale, but if you want, you have the freedom of just using a tablespoon as well, because what I'm going to do is add to this now lovely big grated bowl of carrots is 20 grams of salt. So I have got around about a kilo of vegetables in here. That's what I'm kind of aiming for, somewhere between 900 grams to a kilo of vegetables in this bowl. And to this mix, you are looking at like a 2% salt solution. I can kind of, just to clarify that, is we need the salt to do the preserving. So fermenting is really simple ingredients, like it's what you want to ferment and some salt. The salt does an initial preservation, so it will stop any bad bacteria potentially growing, but it's the right percentage of salt to allow the good bacteria to eventually start to take over. If I say put 5, 6, 7% salt in, what I'm going to end up with is preserved carrots, but they're going to be really salty. They're not going to be, I'd have to wash that salt off. We used salt to preserve, like heavy salting was a kind of technique of preservation. But if we heavily salt this, we're not going to get the live bacteria. And essentially, the live bacteria is what we want, because the live bacteria does the preserving, and the live bacteria also does it will do the, it's the benefits for our gut. Okay, so I'm just going to measure out the 20 grams of salt. And just to clarify, the salt is not table salt. It's either a sea salt, or what I'm using is a Himalayan salt. So they're both good options. So while I am massaging this, that's going to be the next step. I massage it to just let some of the juices come out of the cabbage, see, carrots, could be anything in this bowl. Because this technique is called self-brining, and what we are essentially doing is creating some liquid for the for the ingredients to sit in. So that's a kind of important technique, is that we have some liquid for the ingredients to sit in. So while I massage, if anybody's any questions, it'll help pass the time until I find this is wet enough.
Yes, so I meant to say, actually, if anybody's any questions at all, please use the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. Far away. I have one already. A question that says, can you use fine sea salt or table salt?
Fine sea salt is perfect. Table salt is not perfect, because table salt has got some anti-caking agents in there, and it's essentially going to interfere with the fermentation process. So just try and keep it as natural as possible. So a fine sea salt is really good. And if you want just measuring out a tablespoon of fine sea salt is really good. If that's not available and you have coarse sea salt, I would suggest maybe, trying to dilute that down. So that's my thoughts on that. I can see somebody saying they can't really see what I'm doing. So I'm literally, the bowl is here and I'm just pushing down on it. Do I need to adjust my camera for that to be?
Maybe just angle it down a wee bit,
Sure.
if you can.
I've got it propped up on 7 pizza boxes, so if...
I wasn't going to tell anybody that.
Well, we all have to have some kind of... Now, is that better?
That's fantastic. That's brilliant.
Okay.
Thank you.
So you can see here that I am massaging it, and it's actually starting to get a little bit wet. So the salt is pulling the water out of the cabbage. I keep saying cabbage, the carrots. I think it's because of 8 years of saying cabbage. It's a radical move for me to be doing carrots live. So yes, it's starting to pull out the water, and if I give this a wee squeeze, you can start to see some liquid. Might not be so clear because it's not right close up on me.
You can indeed. Actually, we have a question here from Claire to say, how long do you massage the veg when creating a self-brine? Is it dependent on the type of veg?
Yes, dependent, great question. It's dependent on the type of veg and how finely I've cut it. Mm-hmm. So I would say, had I have just run this through a grater or through the food processor, this would be really wet by now. But because this is more like little sticks, I just have to give it a little bit more of a massage. But, you know, 5 minutes should suffice.
It's quite a good workout too, Dearbhla, isn't it?
It is a good workout. And, you know, and in my time of doing this, I've met some people who maybe have kind of arthritis, or, you know, may not have strength in their hand or whatever. And if that's the case, a little kind of great technique is put the salt in, rub the salt around, you know, just like this, as if you're, you know, say mixing a salad or whatever, and then let it sit to essentially sweat. The salt will still do the job of extracting the water from the vegetables, if that makes life easier for you. So you could put the salt on, head off, go for your walk, do another Zoom call, do whatever it is you have to do, and come back to it. And the salt will have done some work in it, but, you know, obviously for the sake of this, I'm wanting to get it in the jar, you know, for this demo. Again, really for you, it's your choice for how much flavoring you want to put in. I've just put a few sprigs of dill in, haven't gone too crazy on it. And then the next technique is I'm going to take a handful. I have my jar, which I've just washed with hot water. We don't have to kind of get too crazy sterilizing or anything like that. But I've washed it so it's clean. And as I put a handful in, I kind of use my weight to push down on the jar. And that's actually going to help release some more liquid, but it's also going to push out any oxygen that's in there. So when we ferment, when we are intentionally fermenting something, oxygen is not our friend. We are trying to preserve the food. So we need to take one of the agents of food spoilage out of the equation. And in this case, we're taking out oxygen.
Sure.
Because if I left this bowl of salted carrots sitting on the table for, you know, the next couple of months, I would end up with moldy, slimy carrots. But the fact that we're removing an element of spoilage, I'm not going to get that. What I'm going to get is preserved carrots. So just with every single handful, I just give it that little push in, just to make sure that we've got the oxygen coming out. We're not going to get it all out, obviously, especially when we've got something grated, but
well, just a few more questions, actually.
Yes, please, work away.
Emma has asked, and I think we've answered this already, can the carrots be shredded in a food processor? So,
sure.
Yeah, the answer to that would be absolutely.
Whatever makes life easy.
Mary is asking, can you use any type of cabbage, or are some varieties better than others?
Oh, good question. Mm-hmm. I would say the harder the cabbage, the better, because, you know, what the bacteria do is sort of pre-digest this food. So with a hard cabbage, it's going to break it down, but you still get the structure. It'll have done kind of the pre-digestion of the nutrients, but it won't have, you know, changed the structure that much. So if you have something that's very soft, say like a spring green cabbage, or even the January kings, which are January Kings are quite soft, and the sweetheart cabbages are they're a bit softer. It's definitely going to change the texture. And then obviously when you start to go into things like the more exotic greens, like your Chinese cabbage or your bok choy or whatever, they're like a lot softer. So you're going to end up having to add a little bit of texture to those ferments to give it body, because you'll just end up with like a limp, tasty but limp ferment, if that makes sense. So that's a good question. And then of course as well, if I've grated this really fine, I'm going to end up with quite a mushy ferment. That's why I like to keep the chunk. You see here my bowl, I have some of the liquid left over. So that's the salted water. So I'm just going to pour that in. And now what I have is a full jar, quite tightly packed, of cabbage. And we're not packing it right up to the top. We're just packing it to like 2 inches from the top. And the next little tip, so I always say there's 2 kind of crucial points when you're fermenting. Sorry, I just have to clean my hands.
You're okay.
One is that you use the right amount of salt, which is that 2% brine. And the other crucial point is that we do what we can to keep the oxygen out. So ideally, you know, what they kind of achieved in the more cultural context is they would create these weights that you would, ceramic weights that you would put on top, or better yet, they would just use a stone. So you would go out and get a stone and pasteurize the stone, which means stick it in the pan and boil it for 20 minutes to ensure you've got a clean stone. So any of these things are an option to put on top. I have for many years been repurposing the IKEA candle holders. If you spot them in your house or anybody's houses, and they go in, I use that. But basically what I want to do is push everything. I hope you can see this okay. I wish I could turn my jar, but if I do, it's gonna spill out. But you're pushing everything down. You can see how tightly packed that is. And on top, there's a layer of liquid, because this layer of liquid is kind of like the creating the perfect environment now for a really successful ferment to happen. So we have the right amount of salt, and we have now the right environment. No oxygen can get anywhere near these lovely carrots because they're now tucked in under a brine.
Yeah.
So that's
actually, that was a question that had just come through from Kieran, which you have answered, is that because he asked, does it mean if you haven't grated enough to fill the jar, it won't work? But actually, as long as you're not allowing the air in by using your weights, it doesn't matter.
Yep. And I would say if you haven't grated enough, then to make sure to top it up with some water to create that brine. But also, if you like, one way to get over it is to just weigh it. So if you've only got 500 grams of an ingredient, just use a smaller jar. Ideally, for the first ferment and for like total success, what I like to just encourage you is to try and fill it to the top. I often see like pictures of, you know, a half-filled jar, and I just think there is just too much space there for oxygen. And especially if you know, you want to get it right. You want to do it right the first time so that you just don't feel worried about it. You know, we want our first ferment to be successful, so we continue doing it and we will just not feel at all phobic about what we're doing. Just to give you an example, like that's a jar of horseradish that I fermented. Now, I can fill a litre jar of horseradish. I could nearly set that as a challenge because it nearly blinded me at the time.
That's eye-watering, I would say.
It's powerful stuff. So that technique kind of, those are the 2 crucial points: the amount of salt and some kind of a barrier, some kind of way of making sure everything stays in the water, because as by its nature, if you put something in water, it's going to want to try and rise to the top and get out. So you actually need, this is the only point where fermentation, we say it's a natural process. Actually, we have to intervene to make this a process, because it is us creating the condition that actually allows for the natural interaction then of bacteria. But we have to kind of make sure we've made the conditions right. And I just like to take the element of it's definitely a point that could cause a problem, because if you don't ensure that the ingredients are in a brine, what will happen is the top layer will be exposed to oxygen. Like, unless I try to suck that little bit of oxygen out, the top layer will be exposed to oxygen, and that can easily get a mold. And then if that gets a mold, the mold is able to kind of find its way down through. You mightn't see it, but it just creates a suspicion that, you know, when we're already doing this kind of, am I sure, I'm not sure, am I sure, I'm not sure, I'm not quite, what am I doing? It's not a natural way to interact with food, in, you know, certainly in our recent kind of upbringings, that, yeah, it's better just to take that guesswork out.
Okay, brilliant. Couple more questions, Dearbhla. Marco is saying he would like to do that with baby carrots and not break the baby carrots. Okay.
So that brings me on to the next technique then. So this technique, which is called self-brining, is when you are chopping stuff up. So you've chopped it up to create a greater surface area, and essentially you're going to end up with a ferment that's like a coleslaw, you know, coleslaw texture. If you don't want to chop anything up, then what we do is I'm going to use the tomatoes as the example. So here I have tomatoes, and I'm not going to chop these tomatoes up. I'm just going to put the tomatoes in a jar, which is what you would do with your baby carrots, except, you know, maybe as just a kind of point that I like to, when I'm putting a jar together, I want it to look nice as well. But maybe what you would do is, let's pretend this is a baby carrot. We would fill our jar with, you know, all the carrots straight and pack them tightly upright, so that we end up with, you know, just this, it's essentially like they're holding themselves together because they're nice and tightly packed. So tomatoes or baby carrots, whatever you want to do. I'm also going to put some herbs into this, just for flavor, and I'm going to put a little clove of garlic in. Actually, this technique again, like I'm kind of giving you techniques that free you up in the kitchen to do whatever you want. This technique I use to create a jar of garlic itself. I have one here somewhere. No, it's over there in the kitchen. I have a whole jar of garlic, and I often do this. I often just have jars of garlic, jars of ginger, jars of what I call my pantry staples. So jars of chili, and this is the exact technique that I use for it. So that's for flavor. So here we have a jar filled with just those ingredients. And then I have some filtered water, and I'm going to go again for the same ratio. So I'm about to fill this jar up with what would be a 2% brine. So when I was making the liter of carrots with a kilo of carrots, I used 20 grams of salt. So for this, I want to use a liter of water and put 20 grams of salt in to give me a 2% brine. Is that clear? If there's any questions on that, I can recap it, because if you're not used to speaking in percentages, I know it's tricky. So I'm going to make this up into a 2% brine, and I'm working with a half a liter actually. So I'm only putting 10 grams in. Sometimes when you talk about maths, it gets a little bit confusing. Very technical here. I've used the most awkward bottle to do it. That's my 2% brine. I'm going to fill I filled my jar up with the 2% salt solution. Again, I'm going to go for a little weight, or if you don't have that weight, just, I mean, if we'll go back to the baby carrots, it can be that you can pack your jar so tightly that the ingredients keep themselves in. I often do like beans, so I end up with like herby beans. This jar here is actually garlic scapes, if anybody's ever worked with those. And that jar has got no weight in it. So yeah, you can start to get inventive with weights, I would say. So here we go. That's, how simple was that? Like that took me essentially 2 minutes if I wasn't yabbering away. So that to me is like the most liberating fermentation technique. Whilst this bit was quick, the bit afterwards is the bit where we have to engage our curiosity and to kind of put our mind at ease. So if fermentation is new to you, you have done the work that you need to do. The next bit of work is the work of the bacteria. So they will begin the process now of transforming, dominating the jar, starting to break down this, whatever you have put in there. And I can't really give you a time on that. My carrots will be ready in 5 to 7 days. That's the transformation I can kind of put money on, because of there's a lot of surface area here for the bacteria to work with. With something like this, all I can say is that you have to now start to think like the bacteria and go, I have to work my way through this ingredient. So the bacteria are going to work their way through a tomato a lot quicker than they're going to work their way through a whole carrot. Or for example, when I often do the garlic, I sometimes don't even peel them. You know, I'm sometimes so short of time that I will just take the outer skin off my garlic and put it in the jar. So the bacteria have to like work their way through all of that. So the time it can take could be anything from like 2 weeks to 6 weeks. And really, this is where I think it's really quite fascinating, our interaction with fermentation. We can get really excited and we can do something and put it in a jar, and then we can possibly never go near it. We can possibly be so scared that we just go, oh my God, I'm not, like, you know, just open it and throw it down the sink, or oh, it's been a failure, or it does taste wrong or whatever. So this is where it's actually okay for you to come and interact with it. So say, for example, 2 weeks later, I'm going to open the jar and it's not going to look like this. It's going to be a little bit cloudy. A byproduct of fermentation is carbon dioxide, so it's going to have created some gas. So you'll possibly open the jar and you'll get this. Actually, I should see if I should do it here with one of these. Sometimes they hiss. So this is a jar of nasturtium leaves. Oh yes, you can hear. So there's a bit of a pop and a hiss. But this is a jar of nasturtium seeds that, you know, the beautiful flowers and the leaves that you can eat. And then the seeds, I collect them at this time of the year and ferment them as like a version of capers. And they take a while to ferment. But once you put things away like this in a 2% brine jar, they can just last for months. It's like, you know, months, I mean years. They can literally sit in this brine for a very, very, very long time, preserved. And essentially the live bacteria are doing the work. The live bacteria are at their peak kind of diversity around about the 2.5-3 month mark. Then they start, like the whole landscape starts to change. I actually once had everything analyzed, and I had specifically kept a jar behind by 1.5 years. So I hadn't touched it, I hadn't opened it, and I had it sent off to be analyzed. And I mean, the life that was going on in there, the diversity was just insane. It was really incredible. There was still the majority beneficial. There was actually nothing that would cause concern, and this was like analyzed to the, you know, a really kind of intense profile. I mean, there was hundreds and hundreds of different families of bacteria in there, but none of them a concern. So these things are going to be doing a great job at preserving, and then obviously when you eat them, they are doing some magic work in your gut, as they don't populate, but they pass through, and they, you know, help the environment in your gut. So it's really quite, it's magic. It's
it is magic, and actually you can, I mean, your enthusiasm coming through there is just magic too.
Well, I don't know why anybody wouldn't ferment now. I'm just totally, if you're not into it, I don't understand why you would do yourself the injustice.
Exactly. There are, what have we got? We've got quite a few questions actually. We've got Maria Guardino has said they have those candle holders, so that's brilliant, which is great.
They're now like top dollar, so you can sell them for a fortune.
Joanna Paul is she has said, what are the benefits of using a fermenting jar? Do you still need to use a weight?
So a fermenting jar, there are some sophisticated jars out there now which have like a little valve or a little lock system on them. The lid actually does like a kind of a seal, or the lid can have its own little weight as part of it. So absolutely, if that's available to you, then go for it.
Okay.
Yeah.
We've got quite a lot of questions actually. We've got Claire has she's saying obviously taste is subjective, but have you tried any flavor plus vegetable experiments that weren't a good mix?
The only thing that I think has been absolutely atrocious is broccoli, and that could be completely me. Because it's so vast, as you say, like taste is just one of these things that is a mystery, really. It's just so fascinating how we all experience it so differently. But broccoli, and I mean the heads, are so vile that I would never repeat that experiment. Bizarrely, cauliflower florets are divine. What strangely does work very well as a ferment is the broccoli stem. But one thing I would say, like, okay, the flavor of fermentation is predominantly, it has a sour note, and depending also on what you put in there, it's pungent. So if you have got the kind of, I mean, we're really at a stage where our palates are quite sweet and quite, we like sugar and fat together. It's just like instant win. I do think I should have a career in donut making, but just can't seem to match it with my morals. But yeah, I think anything that's extremely green, kale would be another example. It's such a strong flavor that it's accentuated with this sour note that really doesn't work for me. It doesn't mean that it wouldn't work for you, but and then in terms of like flavors to add to that, yeah, I would just say that fermentation is going to intensify a lot of things. So if it works on its own, it's going to be added to with fermentation. Fermentation really makes things kind of come alive. And if you know the flavor, like I would say experimenting, by all means go for it. You could strike upon a really amazing new thing, but there are many tried and tested wonderful recipes that just, you know, they do work. They do work.
Okay.
If you are struggling, oh, there goes the rest of the water. If you are struggling with the flavor of fermentation as you know, as an initial flavor, what I would suggest is matching it with a fat. So like have your ferment, say have this dilly carrot or the tomatoes, whatever, and maybe add a nice olive oil or some avocado, or match them with a really nice fat, and that fat sour note is really good, like just as in a salad dressing. It works together as a combination. So that's
I like to actually, if I'm doing like mixed greens, like just a green salad, I like to add my kimchi, which you taught me how to do at one of your workshops, just through that, and that kind of adds your seasoning as well. So yeah, we've got there's lots of questions here, Dearbhla, so I'm
happy to answer questions as long as people are happy to ask them.
So Mary's asking, do you grow your own garlic? She's hoping to grow some, and apparently December is the best time to start it. So December is the best time, Mary. If you grow your own, well, we talked about.
Well, I'd say you probably could answer the question better than I, because my garden is not as. That's going to be my next aim, is to have my own full garden.
I would say, Mary, yes, if through the winter, garlic actually does better if you can get some now and get, it gets a frost or two, so it'll divide better for you. So
I would really advise people to put some garlic in a jar this way. It is just, garlic is such an amazing ingredient that you may as well have a probiotic. So if you've grown your own, all the better.
Yeah, exactly. So, and it hasn't been sprayed or anything else. Jim is asking, can you wash your vegetables too much or too little before cutting? And somebody else has asked, Kieran has asked this too, if I wash the veg first, does enough bacteria still cling on? And am I okay to ferment with bruised veg?
Okay.
So that's probably a bit like how much bacteria should be in your veg, I suppose.
Yeah. So just for example, the carrots I used are organic carrots, and I didn't wash them. Right. There's no soil in them, obviously. That was all rubbed off, but I didn't wash them.
Okay.
And if, for example, I wasn't using organic, because that's not always available, I would peel them. And actually a study was done some time ago, and it did show that pesticides that would be present on non-organic vegetables, once fermented, the pesticide load had dropped significantly after fermentation, because the fermentation process is breaking stuff down. So where it went to, I don't know, but
you know what, that's really good to know. It's brilliant, isn't it?
The other thing, then the other question was about the bruising, and I would say that the integrity of the food that you're using to ferment will influence the ferment. So I would suggest maybe try and take out any bruising, like cut it out of whatever you're using. I wouldn't kind of see, whilst it's brilliant for, food waste and all of that kind of thing, I wouldn't kind of be going and getting all the bruised bits of veg and putting them in a jar, because it may be just that the bacteria that has started to dominate will be the one that dominates completely. So, you couldn't guarantee that the fermentation process would stop that.
Okay. Jim is asking, can you use cooled boiled water instead of filtered?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. Martha is asking, is there anything to look for when the vegetable is fermenting, or to watch out for?
Okay. I think it will be really obvious if something sinister is happening. Two things happen when you are fermenting: is there's bubbles, and that's the carbon dioxide. Depending on the jar you've used, like these are just jars from IKEA. Whilst you may think they're tight seal, they're actually not, and they do let out that carbon dioxide, which brings with it some liquid, which is again something we're not used to. We're not used to like liquid pouring out of jars on our countertop, especially if you've got beetroot or red cabbage in there. it'll bring that colouring out with it. So that's perfectly normal. If there is something sinister going wrong, it will be blue, it will be black, it will be green, and it'll be fluffy. Sometimes what you can get is like a white yeast. And actually I just poured some off this garlic scape earlier on. It's like it looks like it kind of, I suppose if you're not used to it, looks like a mold. It is cam yeast, which is perfectly fine. It's not sinister at all, and unfortunately has been the reason many ferments have been chucked out because people think it's bad. You can just pour that off or lift it off. It's totally fine. So yeah, that's kind of the major thing. There will be the bubbles. If you're using a Kilner jar, for example, you might have to burp that every so often just to let the build-up of carbon dioxide out.
Yeah.
Other than that, yeah.
That's what Amanda has asked. Do you have to release the gas every so often?
If you're using a really tightly fit jar, if you're using these IKEA jars, they do it for you. What I would just say is when you come to finally check it, like say for example, on day 6 or 7, you're coming to check your ferment, just put a little cloth over the top and release it very, very gently. You know, I know you're going to be all enthusiastic and you're going to come run into your jar and you're going to go like this, and what will happen is it will just spill up in your face. There'll be a rush of carbon dioxide and there'll be a big mess. So.
So Diane has asked, other than dill, which other herbs are recommended?
It's your choice. Like really go with whatever. I love carrot and dill together as a combination, but carrot and coriander would be fine. You can use dried herbs. It doesn't have to be fresh. Totally is really up to you, which is...
I like herb fennel as well, actually.
Lovely, yeah. Actually, I mean, you can do whole fennel. You can do... there really is like... There's really nothing that, apart from broccoli, just go for it. It could be an opportunity to mention my book. I did write a book 4 years ago, which was based simply on that fact of like the millions of things that you can ferment. Like I literally was so, I think my experiments just didn't know where to stop. And I just, in fact, the first draft of the book I put in was twice the size because it was literally like you can, once you really are confident with those 2 techniques, just go for it. Just really have fun exploring and really go for it.
Sure. That I have your book, The Cutured Club, which is brilliant. I think
it seems like I've got a kind of a theme of chopping my head off and things.
Okay, more questions. So Claire is asking, does fermentation stop at one point or does the process continue indefinitely?
Oh, good question. So it's kind of like a graph going up. So at the minute, all there is in here is, you know, what was on the vegetables, what was on my hands, what is in the air, that's gone into the jar. Then as the fermentation really takes hold, the lactobacillus and the bifidobacterium are like the main bacteria that start to dominate this jar and take over, and they can be like, you know, up to 80–90% of the main bacteria in there. So that kind of increases and increases and increases up until about 6–7 weeks. Also there's histamines created in this, so if histamine is a thing for you up until the 10-week mark, that's all kind of changing, and the profile of bacteria are changing, and all within a family, but you know, changing. And then at 10 weeks, and this is very general timeline, but then at 10 weeks it kind of plateaus for a bit, and then the lactobacillus bacteria start to kind of die off a bit. And like I said, with the one I had tested, that was a 1.5 year old ferment, the lactobacillus had died off to about 60%. it was still there, and as I said, still the dominating thing. But then there was all these other bacteria, and like they were identifying some are bacteria that live on your hands, some are bacteria in the air. So those initial things that were part of the mix were kind of showing again. So it doesn't stop. I suppose it doesn't continue to kind of go exponentially. It kind of plateaus off is what the correct answer would be.
Okay, well, that actually probably, there's a few people, Nicola and Diane, have both said, do you move the jars to the fridge when you think they're ready? And before you think they're ready, you store them at room temperature, I assume.
So all of this is happening at room temperature. All the fermentation is happening ideally between 17 and 23 degrees. That's where the bacteria are really happy. They will still, the profile will still change below those temperatures, but obviously the colder it is, the less likely they are to do their thing. So again, it comes back to interacting with the ferment. So say, for example, you open this, you've forgotten about this carrot thing, and you come back to it in 3 weeks' time, and you open it and you go, oh my God, that tastes really good. Put it in the fridge, because that's going to keep it at that sort of vibrancy and flavor at that for a longer amount of time. So the fridge is your cooling chamber for just stopping any further fermentation and holding it for a length of time.
So the fridge is like the pause button, really?
Yeah, but I mean, if you see this in context, so we fermented when we harvested, which is like, you know, the past couple of weeks, months, we have been harvesting from our gardens. We would ferment, and, you know, putting it in the context that fermentation really took place the more eastern you got, and the less winter allowed you to grow anything. Like, we're pretty lucky here, we can still grow vegetables in the winter, and it's probably why fermentation never really was a cultural thing. But, you know, you start to look kind of from Eastern Europe on, winter is winter. There's no ground, you can't even see the ground. So what was happening was you were fermenting, the bacteria were dominating and preserving the food. The food was outside, and winter was also keeping it cold for you. So you could still eat it in the winter, and right through to spring when things were warming up, and then you could start to grow again. So that's kind of it in context. We have fridges, so we have fridges and we still can grow stuff in winter. So when you like it, you know, just put it in the fridge. Just see your fridge as the pause.
Okay.
Yeah. But remember to eat it. Don't let it shoved to the back of the fridge. That's another thing.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we have to train our palates.
Well, yeah, so Kelly is asking, we've probably answered that, is the buildup of carbon dioxide something to keep an eye on? Because we've heard stories of exploding jars, and is it recommended that you do burp the jar?
Yes, it is. Yeah. It's recommended you burp the jar. I would say probably you've heard more stories of exploding bottles than you have jars. I have yet to have a jar of something explode. And that really has to do with when you're fermenting, you know, say you have a project going on in a bottle, it's generally going to be a drink that is sugar-based. It's a faster ferment, so the carbon dioxide buildup is faster, and it's more volatile. A jar of food, you know, it's a complex sugar that we're working with. It's a carbohydrate that it's breaking down. So yes, it will build up, but possibly not to the same extent as a bottle. So like I said before, if you're just using a kind of standard kind of like Kilner essentially is the jar that really has the tight seal on it. Other jars or other imitation jars, and there's lots of them now in the market, because this kind of idea of putting things in jars has been, you know, kind of, even just if it's dried goods, has become, you know, more of a kind of house look. They don't have a very heavy seal on them, and the rubber tends to kind of not hold its strength for very long either. So they're going to let the carbon dioxide out. But again, just interact with it. If you feel like it's not going to do the ferment any harm to open it and let some of the carbon dioxide out. That's my general take on it.
We have Ashleen is asking, do you only use organic food stuff?
Mostly when I can, because I'm lucky that I live near Helens Bay Organic Farm, and you know, over the many years I've kind of been the net that catches stuff as well at the end of the seasons, or maybe some food that has been damaged. I will kind of help ferment that. So mostly it would be organic. It's not to say you can't use organic, don't let that be a barrier, but yeah, it's...
As you say, actually fermenting non-organic produce probably improves it in terms of residue or anything that might be there. So Kelly is also saying, could Dearbhla give a quick explainer on some of the health benefits of consuming fermented foods? She is very interested in gut health benefits, and what are the recommendations of the best place to find reading on this topic? Well, your book is probably good. I think I'd share this book. I don't. I'm just, it's
like arrows. Plug arrows.
Explain. It
doesn't now. Click here. Sorry, I've been watching too many of these things and not actually taking part in them. So gut health. It's something the book kind of doesn't go into. The book is purely about recipes, to be honest, but essentially the fermentation, what it does is creates food that is living. So it is the living bacteria that do the work of preservation. And actually it is these living bacteria that we are becoming increasingly deficient in. So as each generation is kind of been popping out, and we've been moving further away from this kind of the back garden as being turned into, you know, something to grow. We've been moving further away from organic food. We've been, you know, buying a lot of stuff, pesticide laden foods. Generation by generation, our guts have actually become quite deficient in beneficial bacteria, and like this is a fact. This has been shown time and time again that we are being born with very little defense in there. So what these fermented foods do is they help introduce this live bacteria, and essentially they are influencing our gut, or what we are referring to scientifically as our microbiome. So if you are particularly interested in this, and you know, you can go down a rabbit hole and completely, you know, be enthralled by this. Our microbiome is currently, you know, the hot topic of the science world as they try to understand what essentially has been a ignored organ. They are seeing this now as like a huge potential in our influence and our well-being. So we have not paid very much attention to it. We have done a lot of stuff, and we have evolved in a certain way to do a lot of damage to it. And that's, you know, a combination of foods and medications, particularly antibiotics. Not saying that they're bad, but just saying they're being overused. And we have started to strip away this microbiome of its diversity, and have kind of, in a way, left us without this wonderful ecosystem that is going to keep us well. And like one way to kind of look at it is your gut is kind of like a garden. So if you just you know, start to kind of pull out all the beneficial things in there that are going to feed the soil and allow the soil to kind of give nutrients. I'm assuming we have a lot of growers here, considering what you've been through. You know, if you start spraying your soil, if you start, you're gonna take away the nutrients of it. So we need to look at our guts as the same thing, and we need to make sure we start to bring these foods in that will benefit them. So organic is a great choice, but by kind of elevating the foods to this sort of more living, more diverse, microbe rich way is a fantastic start to getting to getting some diversity in there. And really essentially what starts to happen bizarrely is your digestive system starts to work like it should do. So that process of breaking down food, absorbing the nutrients from food, and then most crucially getting rid of it becomes a process that's kind of quite easy. And it should all happen, you know, once, twice, possibly 3 times a day. We should be going through this process. And if we have got the right, if we have the diversity in there, and I just essentially see them as helpers, they're just helping you along, then things will operate really, really smoothly. And if you really want to look at it, like, oh, there's so much stuff now. I mean, you could literally write microbiome and how to have a happy microbiome, you'll get loads of stuff. Or a very interesting thing I think that we're at the moment, and particularly in this year, is like our microbiome is really, really playing a massive part in our mental health. How, you know, it's down here, our brain's up there, but like they talk to each other. There's massive communication between our microbiome and our brain. And, you know, this is really important stuff, that the food that we eat can really help your mental health. So, I mean, that's just 2 points. There's so many areas that it helps. Like if you start to help your microbiome, you will literally do the best thing for your general overall well-being. Like, and I really can't stress that enough, that doing that little bit it's only going to improve things. And I would say if you find, actually, I've met so many people in this past 8 years of doing this that at one point my courses used to be just filled with people who'd been referred from a specific doctor. If you eat a fermented food and you find that it doesn't agree with you, as in that you have some kind of like rumble, or it actually is a pretty good indication that now is the time for you to start looking at your gut health, because there's something there that is not accepting these foods, and you need to go on a little journey of investigation. And like a nutritionist or a naturopath would 100% guide you along that. They are so on board with what it means to look at the gut and to see the gut as really the starting point of well-being and the cause of a lot of disease, which is kind of really unnecessary, because the knowledge now it's coming back and it's available to us. So I mean, I could do a whole other webinar on this. I love talking about it, but it really is so multifaceted.
I know. Well, look, we'll scoot through the rest of these questions, hopefully, because I know you have some preserved lemons there, which we could.
Oh, I know. I have preserved lemons, but can you see them?
Yeah. So, Amanda's asked, can you use fermented garlic in other recipes like curries and stuff in the usual way? Yeah. So
essentially, when you have these foods fermented, they are going to give you the probiotic element. What I would say is I try to not cook with them. So just don't heat them up and kill off those probiotic benefits. If you have to, well, you know, you're still going to get the pre-digested effect on the nutrients. But the real benefit with these foods is that they are probiotic, and you don't want to kill off the living bacteria. But one thing that has become a fascination with me, and you have to appreciate, I've been doing this for a long time, so my mind starts to go, oh, I wonder what I can do with this. Especially when you have as many jars as I do. Is that I last year actually started to really get quite fascinated with the idea of how to use these ferments in a way that would nearly convince anybody to eat them, because you do meet a lot of resistance, especially when it's just presented on the side of a plate as this new thing and everybody's wondering what the heck. And you know, they do have a slightly challenging odor if you're not used to it. But what I started to experiment with was how to take these very simple kind of brined vegetables and to start incorporating them into sauces, for example. And I really had a lot of fun playing with this. And finally this year during lockdown, because all my work was suspended, I recorded all of that as a as what I saw as kind of the fundamental sharing. I was just like, after 8 years of doing this and 8 years of fermenting absolutely everything, these are the like key things that I think you should ferment. I think if you have these in your kitchen, it'll free you up to do all these other things. So I had 6 different ferments that I thought are just like, just do these. And from these 6 ferments, I created 26 different sauces, which is like, you can turn this into this or this. And essentially they become the flavor of your food. So I'm always looking for ways to make cooking easier as well. So it's become a really simple process of like, you know, roast something, boil something, whatever the cooking is of one thing or 2 things, like your protein and your carb or whatever diet you're on, whatever combination, your low fat, high protein, whatever it is. I don't take a stance in any of that because I think it's really individual. This sauce or this element becomes the flavor. It becomes like highly nutritious. It becomes the probiotic. It becomes the like a real kind of blend of things. So I did actually put that together as a recorded thing. I recorded it as videos. I wrote an ebook.
Actually, you're offering us so that's like a wee course, which is very good value anyway, but you're offering us 20% off that.
Yes, well, 25%. I was going to say, if anybody wanted to really shortcut through 8 years of me experimenting and to do this course, and it's like a new world for me anyway to teach online, because I just love teaching in person, and it's actually really weird to be speaking to. I know there's loads of you out there, but I can't see you.
I know.
Because I love kind of seeing the light bulb moment with people as well, where they're like, oh, this is so fascinating as a topic. But yes, I was going to offer 25% off on that course, and with just a special code, the Live Here, Love Here, which you would type in at the checkout, and it would give you 25% off the course. And really it's, yeah, what I consider six of the best ferments to do, and then these flavors. And actually some of them, to be honest, you can buy now in the shops because fermentation has become a thing. People are making it for sale. So yeah, that's a little special for anybody, because yeah, I could just go on and on and on talking and teaching. You could be here with me until midnight and I could still be, I still have something to tell you.
Well, I have another question here from Sinead to say she has fermented whole garlic in brine and then put it in the fridge and the liquid has solidified. Any idea what's going on there?
Has she taken it out of the fridge?
Don't know. Sinead, if you're listening, and I'm sure you are, can you ask? I mean, if there was olive oil or something in it, you would say it's just the cold, wouldn't you? But
yeah, I wouldn't have suggested putting olive oil in it, but yeah, like if it was a garlic confit, you would expect it to go hard.
Well, hopefully
That's
Sinead.
what she says. Yeah.
Well, so we'll move on to another one here. Pat is asking, probably missed it, but what the tomatoes that you did tonight, when would they be ready?
So the tomatoes, I mean, I'm going to guess they'll be ready in about 2 weeks, 3 weeks, just with the explanation that, yeah, it takes the bacteria whatever length of time to work their way through whatever the ingredient is. So I'd say 2 weeks they'll be fizzy, and they're like a real kind of lovely pop in your mouth. Nice fizz to them.
Devram is asking questions about if you cut the vegetables into pieces, like green tomatoes, does the technique change or does the salt percentage stay the same? I take it.
Well, for tomatoes specifically, you're going to have the liquid then from inside the tomato. So what I would do is just that first technique, like the carrots, I would weigh the ingredients and create the 2% salt for whatever the ingredients. And then the juice of the tomato is going to give you the liquid, so you don't have to add any extra water. That would be the solution on that. Actually, the salsa, so in the book, and I've shared this online many times, and like on my whatever Facebook page, or there's probably a blog post making salsa, fermenting salsa is just one of the best ferments that I think you could start anybody off on, because we all love salsa, and salsa has got, it shows up in so many fun dishes like your nachos or your tacos or whatever, that when you ferment it, it actually has that zing that really I think an ordinary salsa misses. We put a lot of lime juice or whatever into it to kind of give us that, but a fermented salsa really is so delicious. I've actually yet to meet somebody who doesn't like fermented salsa, because it's just such a treat.
Brilliant. Sarah's asking that if you have a ferment that has no signs of molding, is it likely to still be edible even after a couple of years?
Yes, it's been preserved, so it's going to be edible. But like I said before, the bacteria will have changed in it, and the taste, it's not going to be as vibrant and delicious as it was. So that's when I would get creative about trying to do something funky with it, like hide it in a sauce or turn it into something, or blitz it into whatever.
Okay, Sinead has come back about the garlic that has solidified the liquid. She's saying it was fermented out of the fridge and then put in the fridge after a few weeks.
And I wonder if she took it out of the fridge for a while, would it just... when she says solidify, can she clarify just what that means? Because it doesn't, I can't even kind of imagine why that would have happened, or...
Yeah, we'll get... well, Sinead, come on, more detail.
That's a tricky one, you have me stumped.
Okay, so Amanda has asked, how much fermented food would you need to eat to not have to supplement with probiotics? For example, how does it equate to a capsule of probiotics per day? And I suppose that depends on the capsule, doesn't it?
It does indeed. There's been a lot of proper research to show that a probiotic capsule doesn't necessarily even get to your gut. So that's, you would take the brand that you are currently taking and you would do some research on that. But to put it in some context, it is suggested that 1 tablespoon of sauerkraut, for example, is the equivalent of taking 4 capsules of a kind of freeze-dried, lab-created bacterial profile. So eating it as a live food is much better. And actually, I mean, in my early years of doing this, I think I spent a lot of time trying to kind of get a microbiologist on board to do a study. And essentially a study was never done in my time. And I've kind of stopped really investigating this and maybe need to look at it again to see if it's happened. But it's very hard to get a study done on something that's going to prove that sauerkraut's really good for you, because at the end of the day, there's no profit in it. And who's going to pay for a massive study to prove that eating sauerkraut does the good that it does? All I can say is that somebody who I kind of was with in the process of them healing their gut, when they first kind of started the journey, they had no lactobacillus present. Mm-hmm. By the time they had gone through this process, now this person was very, very sick, but 6 months later, it was evident that lactobacillus was in their gut, and I can leave it up to your own imagination as to how they find that out. But it gets to where it needs to go, and the thought is that it's kind of like protected by a biofilm because it's part of the food, whereas a capsule is just going to possibly not make it past the stomach acid. So I would say stop spending all that money on probiotics because they're expensive.
Yeah.
And buy a cabbage, which is not expensive, and make your own, for sure. Food for me is medicine. I've never taken a probiotic in my life. Well, that's not true, I have, but I don't buy them.
Okay, good. Well, good advice. You're right, Jill. And none of us will ever have to buy a probiotic again.
No.
Claire's asking, would it ever ferment out to alcohol if left long enough?
You're on the wrong course.
You're on the wrong course.
The beer course to the alcohol course.
Okay.
No.
Joanna's asking, while fermenting, is it better to keep them in the dark, or is the light help?
Just don't keep them in direct sunlight, because that's, just going to cause too much of a temperature fluctuation. Or so I would just say, you don't have to do it in the dark. Keep them somewhere visible so you don't forget about them. But no special, doesn't need to be any special compensation. Yeah.
Okay. Sinead, do you know what, Sinead? Can you email me? Can you email me a photograph, and I'm going to pass it on to
Sure.
Because we both can't.
The controversial jar of garlic. No.
Yes, Marco is asking, can you also ferment fruits?
Yes, you can actually, and that might answer the question of the person asking about alcohol. Fruit has got a lot more sugar in it, and it's a simple sugar, so it ferments faster, with the potential of not creating something that's going to be like highly alcoholic, but just the taste will spoil a little bit. So fruit essentially it can be added into things, but it's a quick ferment, and to enjoy it at its best, you kind of eat it within about 2 weeks, as opposed to seeing it as a reliable way to preserve fruit for a long time.
Yeah.
Unless, of course, you want to make alcohol, but then just preserve it in alcohol. Just go straight for the good stuff.
Yeah, just go straight to, that's for you too, Claire. Okay, do you want to do the lemons quickly?
I'll do them quickly, and then I'll probably have to close it off by 8 o'clock. Or sorry, 7:30 are we at? This is a jar of lemons that I work away with, just so that you can see the difference. So they're, really a different color. They're quite gooey. They're a fantastic thing to have in the kitchen, and they're so easy to do. I might need to change the angle of my thingy again. So in here I have got some lemons. I'm actually just going to do a little tiny jar, and I guess the reason why I wanted to do these is because I think they make great presents, and I kind of say it every year, just a jar of preserved lemons for somebody that loves food in your life. Just, it's such a lovely gift to give somebody, and it's such a cheap thing to do. So these, I do try and always work with organic, but if that's not an option, just make sure they're not waxed. And I've already salted them as well, just to make it easier. But you can see here, I cut them in a cross. Can you see that? Mm-hmm. And then I packed each lemon with a tablespoon of salt. So I've kind of done that bit for you, and they've been sitting sweating for the past, I can't see if you can't see my jar, can't you? So then I pop them into the jar, and so this jar is going to take 3 lemons. So if you are doing a liter jar, it's going to take probably about 6 or 7 lemons. So that's, I'll just get the rest of that salt. I know it seems like an awful lot of salt, and we talked about this earlier, using a high salt. A lot of salt was the kind of preservation technique of the ancients. I'm gonna just alter this again. Okay, so I've packed them in. They're not packed in very tight at the moment, but once I pop my little weight in, I'm just taking the weight out of the other one directly for now. Once I pop this in, it's going to push down on the lemons and push up more of the lemon juice. So can you see that now? I've got 3 lemons stuffed in a jar with a lot of salt. And again, the lemon juice has come up over the salt, over the lemons, to kind of give this safe environment. And essentially, that's it. I leave these for 6 weeks. And what I get is the liquid inside is like really kind of gloopy. It's really, really lovely. And I get this lemon that's really soft to pull apart. It's so delicious. I love this as like a really vibrant taste on a dish. If it's too salty for you, you can pull off the pulp on the inside and wash it. But it's just something that just is, to use this in a dish, it's just absolutely amazing. And one of the recipes in this saucy ebook, I actually have a copy of it here printed out. It looks like this. This is the ebook. But there's one of the recipes in this. It's called lemon pickle. I make this up as like a little jar, and I mean, I'd spread this on my toast. It's so delicious, but it's just this real like delicious taste. It's preserved lemons and dates and chili, and it's just really, really superb. So something so simple, like it really is so simple, that cost me £1.50 to buy all those lemons. Wow. You just end up with this gorgeous little jar of flavor. And you know, I've become, the more and more I do this, fermentation definitely changed my palate. It took it away from sweet. I actually couldn't eat a donut now if you put one in front of me. I just don't crave those foods. Mm-hmm. But it opened up this whole new world of just really kind of adoring flavor and really wanting to not miss an opportunity for flavor. Like my breakfast, lunch and dinner is always very, very flavorful. So, and it's with these simple little techniques and little kind of that living quality of the food is really fantastic. So definitely make a jar of preserved lemons for somebody in your
fantastic. How much, to clarify, Stephanie's asking how much salt was in the lemons?
So 1 tablespoon per lemon. I know it seems like a lot, but one thing to remember is when you are using this, you're obviously not using the whole lemon. You're only using a little bit of it. And if salt is something you have to watch out for, you just can kind of wash off that salt. You'll still get all the lemons, but 1 tablespoon of salt per lemon.
Fantastic. I think Sarah's asking, where can I buy unwaxed lemons? I never seem to be able to find them.
Every supermarket.
Yeah, you normally, I've seen them in Sainsbury's and Lidl probably too, actually.
Yeah, I mean, more and more places are doing organic stuff now too, so you definitely can. They definitely are there. And I know the main stall in the market. Oh, can we go to the market? Is the market open? I don't know what's open and what's closed. No. When you can go to the market again, the main fruit stall, they do unwaxed lemons. Yeah. So you can request them. They'll get them for you. So yeah, it's not. Market open on the 11th. Brilliant.
Brilliant.
There.
Very last question from Kieran, and then we'll let you go, Dearbhla, because you've been brilliant. Is the preserved lemons like the lime pickle that you would get that goes well with curries and stuff?
Do you know, it's funny, it's been so long since I've had a pickle like from a jar, is that there's something missing from them. And to me, it is that live quality. Like I would nearly find them they're not balanced enough for me, because I'd say that preserved lemon you've made yourself is more pleasurable than the lime pickle. I seem to have a real memory of that being just too much, but it's a similar idea. It's a very similar idea.
Brilliant. Okay. Well, look, well, this could probably go on all night, but
that's great, because it means people's imagination now is like open and they're ready to start exploring.
There's light bulbs going on
Brilliant.
All over the whole of Northern Ireland, but
IKEA is going to be packed tomorrow.
It's going to be packed tomorrow. Everybody buying the
buying their jars.
Buying their jars and the candle holder.
And the candle holder.
Listen, Thank you so much. I have put up on the chat, I put up your website, the Cutured Club.
Okay.
That course was only, how much was it at regular price? It wasn't.
Well, I think it's 6 sauces, 26 sauces for 26. It's £26 for the whole course, and then with 25% off, it's like £19 or something. So
I'm doing that.
And you could really help me out because I have had all my work cancelled all year. You know, I ran a club where people came to every week or every fortnight for a workshop, and that has all stopped. So it has been just a really crazy year, but it has been nice to be able to explore making these lovely things at home. And I mean, I share these things out of the love of it and to make people's lives better, essentially.
Is that ebook? Is that part of that?
Yes. Yes. So you, as part of the course, you download the ebook and that's all there. And then the videos go through how to make all the different things. And yeah, it's all there.
Right. We're all, but that's what we're all doing this weekend.
It's been my pleasure. Like, it's been so lovely to not have had the kind of workshop buzz for a while and to share some. Although I can't see everybody, it's just been so lovely to be able to share the joy of fermenting again. And you know, as you can see, it's a very exciting topic. So yeah.
But do you know what? There's so many people coming up to say thank you so much in the chat.
Brilliant.
Brilliant. And there's people saying they don't really want to go, but they had to put the children to bed.
I know, I have to do that too.
Thanks a million, Dearbhla. You have been amazing.
Oh, it's been my pleasure. It really has. I love it. So I look forward to all these wonderful, successful projects and very happy tummies.
Fantastic. Thanks a million. Good night.
Thank you, Jilly. Thanks for having me.
Good night. Oh, and this, when I get it edited, it'll probably be up on Monday then on our Live Here, Love Here, Food for Thought YouTube playlist. So
brilliant.
Yeah.
And that's the code. Live Here, Love Here, all in capitals, no spaces. That's the code for any discounts.
I have that too. So everybody's saying thanks a million, thanks a million.
Oh, thank you so much, everybody.
Okay.
It's been a pleasure.
Bye. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.